Ladies and gentlemen, we speak of peace, but our hands are stained with the blood of apathy. We cry for unity, yet live divided by hatred, pride, and fear. If humanity still breathes, then why do we act like it's already dead? This is not just a global crisis, it's a heart crisis. The war isn't just out there, it's within us. And until we face that truth, we will never know real peace. Peace begins in the human heart, not in political treaties. We often look to governments, leaders, and systems to bring about peace, hoping that negotiations and policies will heal what is broken. But the real conflict is not on the battlefield or in boardrooms. It is in the depths of the human soul. We are quick to blame nations and political powers, yet slow to examine the condition of our own hearts. What we see playing out in the world is merely the outward manifestation of an inward sickness. The pride, greed, anger, and fear that ignite wars on a global scale are the same forces that dwell quietly within each of us, waiting for permission to act. If we desire peace, we must first confront the unrest within ourselves. We cannot demand from others what we have not cultivated within. Peace is not something that can be legislated into existence or enforced by might. It must be born from repentance, from humility, from a genuine transformation that begins with the individual and radiates outward. The heart is deceitful above all things, and this is why we deceive ourselves into believing that peace is someone else's responsibility. We build walls around our conscience, numbing ourselves to the suffering of others, pretending that the problem is beyond our control. We turn peace into a slogan, a political ideal, or a distant dream, but rarely do we see it as a personal obligation. And so we live in hypocrisy, speaking of peace while harboring bitterness, calling for unity while indulging in division, condemning war while remaining at war with our neighbor. Until we are willing to look in the mirror and see the source of unrest within our own hearts, we will continue to be part of the problem. Peace cannot thrive in a heart full of resentment. It cannot exist where pride rules. It cannot grow in soil that has not been broken by truth. The world will never know peace until men and women are broken over their own sin. We have made peace about treaties and ceasefires, but we forget that peace is a fruit of righteousness. It is the result of a life submitted to something greater than self-interest. A person who has made peace with God can make peace with others. But a heart at war with God will always be at war with people. This is the root we must expose. We can attend rallies, wave banners, and chant slogans, but if our hearts are hardened, those efforts will be nothing more than noise. Real peacemaking requires courage, the courage to confront our own darkness, to humble ourselves, to extend mercy where vengeance feels justified. So many are looking for external solutions to an internal crisis. We want a better world, but we don't want to become better people. We want our enemies to change, but we are unwilling to change ourselves. We demand accountability from others, yet refuse to hold our own motives to the light. But peace is not born from power. It is born from surrender, not weakness, but the strength to lay down pride, to confess wrongdoing, to love when it hurts. That kind of peace cannot be faked. It cannot be imposed. It is something sacred, something eternal, something that must be planted and nurtured within each soul. There is a reason why so many peace efforts fail. They deal with symptoms and ignore the disease. They try to manage conflict without addressing the hearts that cause it. We must stop pretending that violence is just the product of bad policy or poor leadership. It is the fruit of human hearts turned inward, obsessed with self, blind to others, numb to God. And this is why the solution is not found in bigger governments, better laws, or stronger alliances. It is found in hearts that have been radically changed, hearts that beat for something more than survival, hearts that see dignity in every human life, hearts that know peace because they've encountered it at the deepest level. Peace begins in the human heart. That is the battlefield where the war must first be won. War is a reflection of the sin and pride we refuse to confront. It is easy to point fingers at governments, to label nations as aggressors, to assign blame to ideologies and systems, but the truth lies deeper. War is not simply a geopolitical event, it is the outward eruption of inward corruption. Long before the first weapon is fired, long before the first bomb drops, war begins in the heart of man. It begins with pride that refuses to yield, with ego that demands to dominate, with greed that is never satisfied. These forces brew beneath the surface of society, quietly influencing decisions, fueling hatred, feeding division. And because we refuse to confront these inner evils, they grow, they mature, and when given the right opportunity, they explode into violence that scars generations. There is a reason why wars keep repeating throughout history. It is not because we lack technology or education. It is not because we haven't learned the lessons of the past. It is because we refuse to confront the darkness within ourselves. Pride blinds us. It convinces us that we are justified in our anger, righteous in our aggression, noble in our pursuit of dominance. We drape our violence in flags and anthems. We baptize our vengeance in the name of justice, but it is still sin. It is still rebellion against the law of love, against the truth that all human beings are made in the image of God. And as long as we let that pride go unchecked, we will continue to repeat the same cycle: division, hatred, violence, and destruction. We teach our children about peace, yet model aggression. We preach about unity, yet live divided. The world applauds strength, but misunderstands it. True strength is not found in the one who conquers others, but in the one who conquers himself. The greatest battles are not won on the battlefield, but in the heart, where a man decides to humble himself, to forgive, to lay down his sword instead of drawing it. Yet we live in a world that mocks humility and glorifies dominance. We have been conditioned to see mercy as weakness and vengeance as power. This is why war continues, because we honor the wrong values, because we reward pride instead of repentance. So often, the path to war is paved with unhealed wounds and unresolved offenses. Nations do not go to war over nothing. They go to war because individuals have been offended, disrespected, challenged, and instead of resolving those conflicts with truth and humility, they allow pride to fester. They allow past pain to become fuel for future destruction. The same is true in our personal lives. We may never step onto a battlefield, but how often do we wage war with our words, with our silence, with our judgment? How often do we let pride keep us from apologizing, from reconciling, from seeking peace with those we've wronged? The same heart that wages war against a neighbor is the heart that fuels conflict between nations. It is all rooted in the same sin: pride, anger, selfishness. We live in a time when people are more divided than ever. Whether it is politics, religion, race, or class, we have built fortresses around our identities and drawn lines in the sand. But these divisions are not merely social or cultural, they are spiritual. They are the result of sin that remains unchallenged, of pride that remains unbroken. We are so busy defending ourselves that we have forgotten what it means to love sacrificially. We are so eager to prove we are right that we have forgotten how to listen. We are so addicted to being in control that we no longer trust in anything higher than ourselves, and this is the soil in which war grows. The tragedy is not just in the loss of life, but in the loss of humanity. War dehumanizes. It strips people of their worth and labels them as enemies. It silences the cry of the innocent and magnifies the roar of power. But it all starts with a refusal to confront the sin that hides in plain sight, the bitterness we excuse, the arrogance we celebrate, the selfishness we nurture. If we truly want to understand the source of war, we must look beyond the headlines and into the mirror. The seeds of war are sown in the soil of the human heart, and if we will not uproot them, they will continue to grow until they consume everything in their path. Compassion is not weakness. It is the greatest strength of the righteous. In a world that often glorifies power, dominance, and control, compassion is mistakenly seen as soft, naive, or ineffective. But there is a quiet power in compassion that can shake the foundations of hatred, that can disarm hostility without a single weapon being raised. True compassion is not sentimental emotion. It is action rooted in courage. It is the willingness to see the humanity in another person, even when the world tells you to look away. It is the decision to extend kindness when retaliation would be easier, to lift up those who are broken when ignoring them would be more convenient. That kind of compassion is not born from weakness. It is forged in fire, shaped through humility and empowered by truth. The righteous are not those who speak the loudest or demand the most attention. They are the ones who bear the burdens of others even when no one is watching. They step into the pain of others not to fix it with shallow words, but to walk with them through it. They offer presence over performance, love over judgment, sacrifice over comfort, and in doing so, they become a force that the darkness cannot comprehend. Compassion requires strength because it calls you to give when you feel empty, to love when you've been hurt, to serve when you have every reason to stand still. It is not passive, it is not idle. It is fierce, determined, and unrelenting in its pursuit of goodness. The world does not understand this kind of strength. It measures power by wealth, by influence, by status. But the one who can look into the eyes of their enemy and still choose mercy has done something more powerful than 1,000 armies. The one who can forgive the unforgivable, who can embrace the outcast, who can speak life into places where death has reigned, that person carries the very heart of God. And it is that heart, that strength, that changes the world not through domination but through transformation. Because compassion doesn't just ease suffering, it confronts evil. It challenges the systems that oppress, the lies that divide, the indifference that kills silently. There is nothing weak about standing with the suffering. There is nothing soft about defending the voiceless. It takes strength to stand in the gap, to be the bridge between what is and what should be. It takes strength to love the unlovable, to remain kind in a culture of cruelty, to show grace in the face of mockery. But those who do are the real warriors, the ones who wage a different kind of war, a war not for land or power, but for souls, for dignity, for peace. They do not win with force, they win with integrity, and their victories are eternal. Even in the darkest moments of history, it has been compassion that lit the way forward. In the face of genocide, it was the compassionate who hid the persecuted. In the midst of slavery, it was the compassionate who led them to freedom. In the trenches of war, it was compassion that bandaged wounds and shared food with strangers. These acts were not signs of frailty. They were declarations of unshakable strength. They testified that no matter how deep the hatred, love could reach deeper. No matter how loud the violence, peace had a voice. No matter how strong the chains, compassion could still break them. But compassion also costs something. It is not free. It will drain you. It will call you to weep, to wrestle, to sacrifice your comfort, your time, your resources. It will make you vulnerable. And yet in that vulnerability, it will make you powerful beyond words. Because when compassion flows from righteousness, it is backed by heaven. When it is rooted in truth, it becomes a weapon of light that darkness cannot extinguish. And those who carry it walk in the strength of the one who created every soul, who sees every tear, who never ignores the cry of the oppressed. We must stop confusing cruelty with courage. We must stop mistaking apathy for control. The strongest people are not those who feel nothing. They are the ones who feel everything and still choose to love. They do not run from pain. They run into it with open arms, knowing that healing begins where compassion is allowed to breathe. This is the strength the world needs. This is the power that restores what hate has destroyed. Compassion is not weakness. It is the fiercest declaration that humanity still breathes, and it is the greatest strength of those who dare to walk in truth and love. We cannot call ourselves human if we silence the cries of the suffering. The measure of our humanity is not in our achievements, our progress, or our comfort. It is in how we respond to the pain of others. When we close our ears to the oppressed, when we turn our faces from the wounded, when we harden our hearts to the desperate, we strip away the very essence of what it means to be human. Compassion is not an accessory to humanity, it is the core of it. Without it, we become cold machines, moving through life without feeling, speaking without meaning, living without truly loving. The cries of the suffering are not distant echoes. They are a call to wake up from our apathy, to remember that every soul matters, that every tear is seen, and that silence in the face of suffering is complicity in its continuation. We live in a world filled with noise, yet somehow we manage to mute the voices that need to be heard most. We silence the poor with bureaucracy, the broken with judgment, the hurting with our indifference. We rationalize their pain, label it as unfortunate, but never allow it to interrupt our comfort. We become so busy defending our own lives that we forget to care for those whose lives are falling apart. But being human was never about isolation. It was never about survival of the fittest. It was about bearing one another's burdens, about standing in the gap, about refusing to look away when it would be easier to do so. The cries of the suffering are a mirror. They show us who we really are. They reveal our character, our priorities, our integrity. When we ignore them, we not only deny others their dignity, we deny ourselves our own, because the truth is, suffering doesn't discriminate. Today, it may be them. Tomorrow, it could be us. The walls we build to protect ourselves from their pain may one day become the prison that traps us in our own. Humanity was designed to function in unity, in empathy, in shared strength. And when we break that bond through silence, we unravel the very threads that hold society together. The test of true civilization is not how advanced our technology is, how tall our buildings rise, or how powerful our nations become. It is how we treat the most vulnerable among us. It is whether we stop for the wounded, whether we speak for the voiceless, whether we give of ourselves to lift the fallen. We deceive ourselves into thinking we are civilized while we walk past the homeless, scroll past the war-torn, forget the imprisoned, and avoid the broken-hearted. But silence is not neutral. It is a decision to pretend we are not connected, a decision to preserve our peace at the cost of someone else's suffering. Every time we remain silent in the face of injustice, we reinforce the power of the oppressor. Every time we ignore the cries of the suffering, we give strength to the very forces that crush them. And every time we convince ourselves that their pain is not our problem, we lose a part of our soul. Because what makes us human is not what we build or accomplish. It's who we love, who we defend, who we reach for in the darkness. The dignity of life is not reserved for the strong, the wealthy, or the influential. It belongs to every human being simply because they are human. To hear the cry of the suffering and do nothing is to deny the heartbeat of humanity. It is to say, in our actions, if not our words, that some lives matter less. That some voices can be ignored, that some tears do not deserve to be wiped away, but that is a lie. That is the poison that has corrupted hearts for generations. If we claim to be human, we must act like it. And to act like it means we feel the pain of others as if it were our own. It means we speak when silence becomes a shield for cruelty. It means we move when stillness becomes a cloak for cowardice. What we tolerate today becomes the standard for tomorrow. If we normalize silence, we normalize suffering. If we allow the cries of the hurting to go unanswered, we create a world where no one will come when we cry. Humanity is not just about shared biology. It is about shared responsibility. It is about standing in the middle of someone else's storm and choosing not to walk away. When we hear the cry and respond, we affirm our humanity. When we silence it, we betray it. Every life matters because every soul is sacred before God. We live in a world that has learned to categorize people by value, by status, by wealth, by power, by influence. But before the eyes of the one who created heaven and earth, no life is expendable, and no soul is insignificant. The worth of a person is not determined by what they contribute to society or how visible they are on the world stage. It is determined by the image they bear, the image of God Himself. From the newborn to the elderly, from the poor to the rich, from the refugee to the ruler, every human being carries that divine imprint. And that reality demands reverence, not just in thought, but in action. It's easy to speak about the sanctity of life in theory, but harder to live it when confronted with people we disagree with, people who have failed, people who seem different from us. Yet if we truly believe every soul is sacred, then our treatment of others must reflect that truth in every moment. We cannot claim to value life while harboring hate. We cannot preach dignity and practice prejudice. The value of life is not something we assign. It is something we acknowledge, and when we forget this, we lose our compass. We lose our moral foundation. We begin to justify violence, division, indifference, all because we've placed some lives above others in our minds. To honor the sacredness of life is to see God's handiwork in every face, to recognize that behind every set of eyes is a story, a soul, a purpose. We may not understand them, we may not even agree with them, but their existence is not a mistake. Their breath is not accidental. They are alive because God willed it, and that alone gives them worth. And when we begin to see people that way, everything changes. How we speak to them, how we serve them, how we stand for them. These things are no longer optional. They are sacred duties. So much of the brokenness in this world exists because people have been treated as problems to be fixed or threats to be avoided, rather than as sacred beings to be loved. When systems are built on fear instead of faith, when policies are shaped by pride instead of compassion, people are reduced to numbers and dignity is traded for convenience. But we were never called to efficiency, we were called to love. We were never commanded to win every argument. We were commanded to honor every soul. And the path to true peace begins not with strategies or speeches, but with a renewed vision of one another. A vision that sees past skin color, borders, beliefs, and failures, and sees instead a soul made by God, loved by God, and worthy of respect, mercy, and justice. Peace is not just the absence of war, it is the presence of righteousness, the fruit of justice, and the evidence of love reigning in the hearts of people. It is more than treaties, more than negotiations, more than carefully worded agreements. True peace cannot be manufactured by man alone because it is first a condition of the heart before it becomes a reality in the world. It begins when pride is laid down, when self-interest gives way to humility, when love becomes the standard by which we live and act. Without righteousness, peace is shallow. Without justice, peace is temporary. And without love, peace is impossible. Many believe peace can be achieved through force or control, but peace that is imposed never lasts. It may silence the noise for a while, but beneath the surface resentment, fear, and hatred remain. Peace is not won with weapons. It is nurtured with truth. It grows where there is honesty, where there is forgiveness, where there is a willingness to see beyond one's own needs and care for the needs of others. It is found when hearts are transformed, not just when policies are changed. The greatest threat to peace is not always the one who carries the sword, but the one who refuses to change his heart. When peace is rooted in righteousness, it produces a kind of strength that does not boast, a kind of power that is not violent, a kind of influence that is not manipulative. It brings healing to what has been broken and restores what hatred tried to destroy. It does not ignore wrongdoing, but confronts it with truth and grace. It does not pretend that injustice is acceptable, but seeks to correct it with compassion and courage. This is the peace that comes from God. It is not of this world, and yet it is meant to be revealed through us in this world. We must stop thinking of peace as the reward for silence and begin to see it as the fruit of righteousness. It is not achieved when everyone stops fighting. It is achieved when everyone starts loving. When the poor are not forgotten, when the stranger is welcomed, when enemies are prayed for, when the voiceless are defended, that is where peace begins. Peace is not passive. It is active, intentional, and deeply spiritual. It requires sacrifice. It demands humility. It calls us to lay down our desire for control and pick up the cross of selflessness. The world says peace is impossible, that humanity is too divided, too broken, too far gone. But the truth is that peace is not a dream. It is a calling. It is a path we must choose every day, even when the world chooses otherwise. It may cost us comfort. It may cost us pride. But it leads to something the world cannot give, a deep, abiding sense of unity, justice, and love that can only come when hearts are turned toward what is right, pure, and holy. Hope is not dead as long as love still speaks through us. In the midst of darkness, in a world torn by war, injustice, and cruelty, hope can seem like a fading echo, a distant memory of what once was. But hope does not die easily. It clings to every act of kindness, every word of truth, every gesture of compassion. It may be bruised, but it breathes. It may be weary, but it waits. And as long as there are hearts that still believe in love, that still reach out across the lines that divide us, hope remains alive. Love speaks in ways that weapons never can. It speaks through the hands that serve, the voices that heal, the feet that walk into suffering, not to conquer, but to comfort. Love does not shout for power. It whispers for peace. It does not seek vengeance. It seeks reconciliation. And every time we choose love over hate, mercy over bitterness, understanding over judgment, hope takes another breath. Hope rises not because of circumstances, but because of conviction, the belief that love will have the final word. The world tries to silence love with fear. It tries to bury it beneath greed, prejudice, and pride. But love endures. It is patient. It is persistent. It does not give up. It refuses to let go of humanity, even when humanity lets go of itself. And when love speaks, when it dares to forgive, when it chooses to lift instead of crush, when it sees dignity in the forgotten, hope is awakened again. Not a shallow hope built on wishful thinking, but a defiant hope built on truth, on justice, on the unshakable reality that what is good still matters. Some say the world is too far gone, that we are beyond repair, but love has never waited for permission to act. It has never asked if the odds are in its favor. Love moves forward even when it is wounded. It builds even when others tear down. It believes even when the world has stopped believing. And as long as there are those who still choose to love, there will be a path forward. There will be hands extended, bridges built, wounds tended, and wrongs confronted with grace. Hope is not loud. It is not always celebrated, but it is resilient. It survives in the silence, in the shadows, in the hidden places where love still breathes. It is found in the mother who refuses to hate, in the child who chooses to smile, in the stranger who offers help with no expectation of return. These are the sparks that keep hope burning, and these sparks, when gathered together, can ignite something greater than any force of destruction. They can remind us that the darkness is not all there is, that the story is not finished, that humanity still breathes.